I'm Andrew Simpson with the Ether Automation, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to automate the structuring of your Workdrive folders in Zoho CRM. So the reason I'm making this video is a lot of you have reached out to me asking for help with pulling out files out of Zoho CRM. And you can do that, and I have some videos about that. But if you're going to be dealing with a lot of files or large files, or you need them to be organized a certain way, the best way to deal with this is to use Workdrive. You get more storage. It's easier to pull files out. There's a lot of things you can do. You can also organize them a little better. So what I'm going to show you in this video is setting up an automation so that when you win a deal, it will look at the account to see if there's a Workdrive folder for it. If not, it will create one, and then it'll create a Workdrive folder in the account Workdrive folder, and then I'll attach both of those folders to their respective records in Zoho CRM. So let's start this out. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I'm sharing the right screen. Otherwise, this will be a short video. This is the second time I've had to record this because the first time I actually shared the wrong screen. So if I'm copying and pasting things, just know I'm only doing it because I've done this once before. So let's start out. I have this deal, and if I go to attachments, this was from the previous run. Let's just go ahead and delete that. All right, so there are no attachments now in this deal. And if I go to the related account, there are now no attachments. So the account is called acceptance test. And the deal, which is related to the acceptance test account, as you can see right here, is called acceptance test deal name. So what we want to set up, let's start out by creating a workflow rule. And we're going to call this deal is one. And you can see down here, this is created today in my previous video. Let's click next. So on a record action, when something is edited, when a specific field is modified and the field is stage to a one stage. We're going to do this for all deals. And what we want to do is let's create a function, new function, and let's write our own, and let's call this deal is one. Great. Now we're in the function. Let's start out by creating some architecture here. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get the deal record and the related account record. Seems simple enough. And then we need to check to see if the account record already has a Workdrive folder. And we're going to do this we're going to assume that the Workdrive folder on the account is named the same as the account. So it's allergy season. We're assuming the Workdrive folder is the same name as the account record. So then we want to say if the Workdrive folder is not found. And then if we don't find one, we want to create a Workdrive team folder. And let's go name the folder after the account. And then do an API call to Workdrive, and then get the created folder ID. And we want to update the account record with the Workdrive folder in the attachments section. Very simple. Now, all of this is if the Workdrive folder is not found. If it is found, if Workdrive folder is found, we want to do something very simple, which is get the folder ID. And finally, once we have the folder ID, we can do the following. We can create a new Workdrive folder within the account Workdrive folder. And then update the deal attachments with the new Workdrive folder. Very, very straightforward. Now, if you're as out of breath as I am, the end code is going to be 150 lines long, so it's going to be a longer video. You can skip ahead if you want to see just the code at the end. So let's go through this. Let's start out by creating some parameters, ID. Now, my preference is only ever to create one parameter. It simplifies a number of things. So let's go deal equals zoho.crm.getRecordById. And the record we're getting is the deal, and it is the ID. And then we want to get the account. Account equals zoho.crm.getRecordById. And this is the accounts. And the ID for the account is deal.get. If you look at it, it is account name. And there's going to be an underscore. And because it's a lookup field, there's a .get ID right there. Very simple. So now we want to check to see if the account record already has a Workdrive folder. As you can see, it doesn't. So let's start out by assuming there's not going to be a Workdrive folder. So folder found equals false. And then we want to go and get the attachments from the account record. So attachments on account equals zoho.crm.getRelatedRecords. The relationship name here is attachments. The parent module is accounts. And then the ID is the same as right here. So you could have hundreds of attachments on your account. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through all of those attachments to find the folder and see if it exists. So for each element, we're going to put the attachments on account. So for each potential folder in attachments on account, we want to do check to see if it's a folder. So if potential folder .get. Now you're gonna have to trust me on this, and you're gonna have to trust me because I just did it a second ago in a previous video. But you're gonna want to use the variable here, file underscore name. So if the file name is equal to deal.get deal name. So because we're assuming the Workdrive folder is the same as the account record. Oh, that's wrong. So we actually want to use account name, not deal name. Account name, and we're going to put in name here. So if the folder name is the same as the account name, then that's the folder. We're going to assume that's the folder that exists. So we're going to then switch it to folder found equals true. We're also going to do something that's undocumented called a break. And what this break does is it will, let's say there's 100 things in this list. If this is done on number 3, it won't do the other 97 of them. It will just leave the loop. And the last thing we want to do is we want to say found folder, folder on account equals that one right there. And this will come in handy later. So if the Workdrive folder is not found, now that we're checking and we can see that the folder is found, let's go if folder found equals false. So we know it's not there. Then let's do this if statement. And let's go down to right here, because this is if it is found, we want to end this if statement right here. We want to create a Workdrive team folder. Now, if I go to Zoho Workdrive API and go to team folders, you can go to create a team folder. And this is the URL you want to use, and you want to create it like this. You also need to create the scope right here. And so in the previous video, I made a connection. I've made another video on creating connections. So if you don't know how to do that, you can click in the top right. But I've created a connection called Workdrive files. And there are all of these scopes involved. So for this particular endpoint, you need the team folders create. And we have that right here, team folders create. Because we're attaching it to a record, we need modules all. And finally, because we're going to create another file later on, we want files all for Workdrive. So you're going to need to do that as well. I'm just going to use that here. So we're going to create a team folder. Now, let's start out by bringing in a webhook under this API call. And we're going to come back to this in a second. So we want to have a structure, an API structure that looks similar to this, right? So there's an object, a map, and then in that object, there's a map called with a key. There's a key for data, and there's a map. And then within that, there's attributes and type. And then within that, there's name, parent ID, and is public within team. So we're going to kind of go through this one as fast as we can. Let's go deal folder params equals map. So this is the outermost object. And then within that, there's the attributes map equals map. And this is the innermost map. So let's start adding some things to that attributes map. So attributes map dot put. And within that attributes map, there's a name, parent ID, and is public within team. So name, parent underscore ID, and is public within team. And I'm actually going to copy and paste that. It's public within team. So the name, we want to name this after the account. So let's copy where we checked from before, copy and paste, boom. So the second is the parent ID. Parent ID is the parent ID of the team you want to share it on. So if you look, I'm in my team folders right now. And if you look at the URL, this is the organization ID. This is the team ID. So I'm actually just going to copy this. And I'm going to paste it right here. And finally, is public within team. This is my favorite thing. It's unbelievably funny. It's true or false, but as a string for some reason. So we're going to do true in quotes, true. So now that we have the attributes map, we want to do, it's called the data map equals map. And that is this. right here. So data map equals map, data map dot put, and within there we are putting attributes, comma, and putting the attribute map. And then we're also putting within the data map dot put the type, which if you look at the API documentation, it is team folders. And finally, we're going to put all of this in this deal folder params dot put data, comma, data map. We're going to call this Workdrive folder response. And we are going to copy this URL, paste it here. The type is post, and you can tell it's a post because it says post right here. The parameters is this deal folder params. Now, if you haven't seen my previous video on the dots to string thing, you should watch that one before this one, but we're going to add to string and then headers. This is the secret sauce. So I haven't talked about headers, and it doesn't say anywhere here. So I'm going to make a headers map. Header map equals map headers map dot put. And I don't know why Zoho has this, but if you're doing an API call to Workdrive and it's not working, that's because you're forgetting this critical piece, which is accept, comma, application slash VND dot API plus JSON. There we go. So I'm going to copy this, put it in headers. And finally, we have this Workdrive files connection we want to use. Connection, Workdrive files, in quotes. So this will make your Workdrive folder for the account. Then we want to get the URL or get the folder ID. So if I look at the API response, it's going to be data ID. So let's folder ID equals Workdrive get data dot get ID. Finally, we want to update the account record with the Workdrive folder in the attachment section. So what are we going to do? Let's look at a folder URL. You'll notice that it's the same link. It's the organization, then it's the team, and then this is the Workdrive folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this. I'm going to go back to my function and account Workdrive URL equals, paste this, and then right here, I'm going to put in my folder ID. So this will give me the account Workdrive URL. And then if you want to attach this folder to the account, we go to Zoho CRM API documentation. There is a photos and attachments, then add an attachment. And this is what it looks like. It's this URL, but you would say the module name here and the ID here. And then you'd do an attachment URL. So let's go ahead and copy this. Drag in the webhook. And we'll call this a response. The URL is this. However, it is accounts because we're attaching it to the accounts, plus the account ID. And the account ID can be found right here. .get ID. The type is a post request. Parameters, we're going to come back to that one. I'm going to take away headers and I'm going to put in the connection, the same one that we use here, the Workdrive files, because you need modules all, and we have modules all in our scopes. And finally, if you see my previous video on webhooks within Deluge, you'll know I talked a lot about content type and how it's a very special occasion when you need to use this. Well, this is one of those special occasions because the content type for this is application/x-www-form-URL encoded. Now, what do we want to put in here as parameters? If you look, it is right here, it's attachment URL. So I'm going to copy this, go back to the function. We're going to say payload equals paste, but we actually want to use this account Workdrive URL. So let's do that. And let's put the payload in. Now, this will work. If you ran this, this would create a Workdrive folder and it would attach it to the account. It's missing something critical and it's undocumented. So I'm going to make sure I have a chapter here so you could skip to this section if it's not working. This payload only includes the link and not the name of the folder. So we're going to add something, title, oh, we want to add and title equals plus the name of the folder that we're using, which is also right here, is the deal name. So that would name the folder the deal name in the account attachments. But there's one more problem, and that's right here. Because it's www URL form encoded, that means if your account name has a space in it, it won't work because spaces aren't allowed in the URLs. So what we actually want to do is go zoho.encryption.url encode, and we want to put your account name in there. And then that sums up what to do if the folder is not found. So if the folder is found, if we found the folder, let's start by copying this. If folder is true, it's found. We want to get the folder ID, which we can also see. We want to use the same variable. So folder ID equals, get the folder ID equals. And if you remember from up here, we have this found folder, or this folder on account that we want to use. So let's go down here, folder on account dot get. So if we're going to make a variable called a folder ID list. And I'm going to tell you why. Equals folder on accounts dot get link underscore URL. So when you get a folder in your attachments, to get the URL, you can use this link URL. And that would give us this link, and this is the one we're using. Now, we want to get this folder ID right here. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to turn that string into a list based on the based on the slashes here. So now everywhere there's a slash, we have, it's like a new item in the list. And I want to get the 1 to 3rd thing back from the end of the list. So folder on account would be, so the folder ID would be the folder ID list. Then we're getting the folder ID list size minus 3 things. So if we get the length of the list, I don't care how many it is, and then we minus 1, 2, 3, this is the one we're going to use. So this is the folder ID, and that's it. That's all you got to do to get that. So finally, we're going to create a new Workdrive folder within the account Workdrive folder. How are we going to do that? Let's scroll up. Let's actually just copy all of this stuff right here. Copy. We're going to paste it, and then we're going to edit this stuff. So let's start by editing the name. The deal is going to be the deal name. If I go to my Workdrive API, rather than using a team folder this time, we're going to create it as a normal folder. And so the parent ID would be the previous folder ID that we use. So this parent ID is the folder ID that we worked so hard in to get in the previous section. And then we're actually going to take this out because if you look at the API documentation, it's no longer needed. And then the type is now files with an S. All of this remains the same except for the URL. Boom, done. And so this will create a Workdrive folder in the account folder named after the deal. So finally, we want to update the deal attachments with the new Workdrive folder. So we have this section right here where we do this. Let's copy this as well. Paste. We're going to Workdrive deal folder response. And we're going to paste this right here. This is the deal folder ID. And then the URL, deal Workdrive ID, right here. So the deal Workdrive URL is going to be similar, but we want to put the ID for the new folder at the end right here. And then let's take out files. So this is the deal Workdrive URL. And we are going to copy this payload. It's still in here. We're going to change this to deals, add the ID for the deal. And finally, we want to use the deal name for the name of the folder in the deal. So I'm going to now run this as a test. Line 83. So I'm going to grab my ID for the deal. As you can see, I have no attachments, and I have no attachments in the account either. No attachments, no attachments. And if I go to the Workdrive, there's no attachments, no special folders in my team. So now if I run this function, I just ran it and I forgot to spell check. If I go to this folder and click acceptance tests, there is a folder in here with the deal name. If I go to the account and I refresh, there's now an attachment with the name of the account. I can click that and it opens the folder, and I can go to the deal, refresh this. There's now one attachment, and if I click this, it will open the folder. I hope this is helpful. I'll see you in the next video.